Hi, I'm a Homo sapien from planet Earth. I call myself Alpha.
And I'm a Homo sapien from parallel Earth, and he calls me Peter.
Today we're talking about Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, which is a sequel to his earlier book Sapiens. And this is part one of two-part talk about this book. Like this writer's earlier book, Sapiens, I loved this book as well. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. You seem to have few other
Yes. A writer seems to have disregard for civilized society. He wants to convince us that our base nature is animalistic and our attempt to be civil is laughable. My personal belief is that all civilizations are basically erected on some fallacious belief or the other. So in the hindsight, ultimately all civilizations come across as hypocritical. Pyramids and art of mummification wouldn't have existed had Egyptians not believed in afterlife and deification of pharaohs. The writer wants us to be more objective, but I don't see how civilization can be formed being too objective by accepting our basic biological nature. Collective false belief is essential for all civilizations, and as we discussed last time in his book Sapiens, today money, nation and various political ideologies are such false beliefs that current civilization is based on.
No, the writer wants to convince us that our attempt to control the uncontrollable is laughable. He asks us to accept our basic biology and live abiding by that biology. This drama of civilization that is born out of false beliefs can be different and perhaps better if we accept our animal nature and our biological limitations. At least that is my understanding of this book. Book starts with a premise that civilized humanity has always faced three problems: famine, plague and war. Large portion of the population perished due to these three problems, but over the last century and especially over the last few decades, we have made these unavoidable problems into manageable problems for larger population. In fact, today most of the people die not due to famine or epidemics, but due to lifestyle diseases due to overeating, not in war but in automobile accidents.
Yes, science and technology born out of human ingenuity has made today's world much of a relative comfort for larger population. The book's premise is a question: what is humanity going to do next now that Homo sapiens have managed to solve these perennial problems of famine, plague and war? Writer posits the next frontiers for humanity to conquer are immortality, happiness and godlike powers. As the subtitle of this book says, it is a brief history of tomorrow.
Humanity almost solved all problems but created new ones, such as possibility of nuclear warfare and cyber warfare. So, quote, "Over the last 70 years, humankind has broken not only the law of the jungle but also the Chekhov law." Anton Chekhov famously said that a gun appearing in the first act of a play will inevitably be fired in the third. Throughout history, if kings and emperors acquired some new weapon, sooner or later they were tempted to use it. Since 1945, however, humankind has learned to resist this temptation. The gun that appeared in the first act of the Cold War was never fired. By now, we are accustomed to living in a world full of undropped bombs and unlaunched missiles, and have become experts in breaking both the law of the jungle and the Chekhov law. If these laws ever do catch up with us, it will be our own fault, not our inescapable destiny. Unquote.
Here's how writer puts the premise of this book. Quote, "History does not tolerate a vacuum. If incidences of famine, plague and war are decreasing, something is bound to take their place on the human agenda. We had better think very carefully what it is going to be. Having secured unprecedented levels of prosperity, health and harmony, and given our past record and our current values, humanity's next targets are likely to be immortality, happiness and divinity. Having reduced immortality from starvation, disease and violence, we will now aim to overcome old age and even death itself. Having saved people from abject misery, we will now aim to make them positively happy. And having raised humanity above the beastly levels of survival struggles, we will now aim to upgrade humans into gods and turn Homo sapiens into Homo Deus, unquote.
Death obviously is an end of life, but according to writer, humanity doesn't think that way. For humanity, death is just a minor technical problem that can be solved. So, quote, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted by the UN after the Second World War, which is perhaps the closest thing we have to a global constitution, categorically states that, quote, the right to life, unquote, is humanity's most fundamental value. Since death clearly violates this right, death is a crime against humanity, and we ought to wage war, total war, against it. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights does not say that humans have the right to life until the age of 90. It says that every human has a right to life, period. That right isn't limited by any expiry date, unquote.
This sounds eccentric, but few smart people in Silicon Valley are seriously taking steps to ensure immortality. Of course, with the help of new medical sciences and emerging biotech, there is a chance humanity might get closer to become, if not immortal, at least immortal. People can still die in wars and by accidents, but immortality can be achieved by replacing diseased organs and upgrading old organs each decade. This is the belief of smart people in Silicon Valley. Writer has a different view than this. So, quote, my view is that the hopes of eternal youth in the 21st century are premature, and whoever takes them too seriously is in for a bitter disappointment. It is not easy to live knowing that you are going to die, but it is even harder to believe in immortality and be proven wrong, unquote. Writer goes on to clarify that modern medicine has not prolonged life, just saved us from premature death. So, quote, contrary to common notion, 70-year-olds weren't considered rare freaks of nature in previous centuries. Galileo Galilei died at 77, Isaac Newton at 84, and Michelangelo lived to the ripe age of 88, without any help from antibiotics, vaccinations, or organ transplants. Indeed, even chimpanzees in the jungle sometimes live into their 60s. In truth, so far modern medicines hasn't extended our natural lifespan by a single year. Its great achievement has been to save us from premature death and allow us to enjoy full measures of our years. Even if we now overcome cancer, diabetes, and other major killers, it would mean only that almost everyone will get to live to 90. But it will not be enough to reach 150, let alone 500. For that, medicine will need to re-engineer the most fundamental structures and processes of the human body and discover how to regenerate organs and tissues. It is by no means clear that we can do that by 2100, unquote.
According to Epicurus, an ancient Greek philosopher, worshipping gods is a waste of time, that there is no existence after death, and that happiness is the sole purpose of life. Also, Jeremy Bentham, a British philosopher who espoused greatest happiness of greatest number, said that only worthy goal of the state, market, and scientific community is to increase the individual happiness. But contrary to that belief, quote, during the 19th and 20th century, although many paid lip service to Bentham's vision, governments, corporations, and laboratories focused on more immediate and well-defined aims. Countries measured their success by the size of their territory, the increase in their population, and the growth of their GDP, not by the happiness of their citizens. Industrialized nations such as Germany, France, and Japan established gigantic systems of education, health, and welfare, yet these systems were aimed to strengthen the nation rather than ensure individual well-being, unquote. Schools were founded to produce obedient citizens. Free healthcare was not to make people happy, but to make people nation stronger, to produce healthy soldiers and workers and healthy women who could give birth to healthy soldiers and workers. So, quote, when Otto von Bismarck pioneered state pension and social security in late 19th century Germany, his chief aim was to ensure the loyalty of the citizen rather than to increase their well-being. You fought for your country when you were 18 and paid your taxes when you were 40 because you counted on the state to take care of you when you were 70, unquote. Also, American Declaration of Independence guaranteed the right to the pursuit of happiness, not happiness itself. In short, your state is not responsible for your happiness.
Yes. The writer asks this question, quote, if famine, plague and war are disappearing, if humankind experiences unprecedented peace and prosperity, and if life expectancy increases dramatically, surely all that will make humans happy, right? Wrong. When Epicurus defined happiness as the supreme good, he warned his disciples that it is hard work to be happy. Material achievements alone will not satisfy us for long. Indeed, the blind pursuit of money, fame, and pleasure will only make us miserable. Epicurus recommended, for example, to eat and drink in moderation and to curb one's sexual appetite. In the long run, a deep friendship will make us more content than a frenzied orgy. Unquote. Psychologically, happiness depends on expectations rather than objective conditions. We don't become satisfied by leading a peaceful and prosperous existence. Rather, we become satisfied when reality matches our expectations. And biologically, our biochemistry makes us happy rather than economic, social, or political situation. Pop in a feel-good pill and you're happy. Today's scientific belief is happiness is pleasant bodily sensation. The writer believes all of these different ideas of happiness ultimately are nothing but tricks of evolution played upon us. Both Epicurus and Buddha told us pleasures are ephemeral and leave us dissatisfied. So be moderate in your pursuit of pleasures. But for today's capitalist world, happiness means pleasure and pleasurable sensations. And that has made the rise of various industries possible in today's world. Different flavors of ice creams and varieties of smartphones exist and get created in order to satisfy our inner dissatisfied animal. Unfortunately, we still remain dissatisfied, but capitalist markets flourish.
In future, humans will be merging with technology and turning into cyborgs. And although this is true, writer says we are still the same Homo sapiens as our ancestors, ancient ancestors. Quote, for thousands of years, history was full of technological, economic, social, and political upheavals. Yet one thing remained constant: humanity itself. Our tools and institutions are very different from those of biblical times, but the deep structures of the human mind remain the same. This is why we can still find ourselves between the pages of the Bible, in the writings of Confucius, or within the tragedies of Sophocles and Euripides. These classics were created by humans just like us. Hence we feel that they talk about us. In modern theater productions, Oedipus, Hamlet, and Othello may wear jeans and t-shirts and have Facebook accounts, but their emotional conflicts are the same as in the original play. Unquote.
Even if that is so, writer says technology can enable us to re-engineer our human minds. Predicting those future minds would be impossible given our limited biology. Our organic minds cannot imagine how technologically advanced inorganic minds would look like in the future. So, quote, in the 21st century, the three big projects of humankind will be to acquire for us divine powers of creation and destruction and upgrade Homo sapiens into Homo Deus. We want the ability to re-engineer our bodies and minds in order, above all, to escape old age, death, and misery. But once we have it, who knows what else we might do with such ability? So we may well think of the new human agenda as consisting really of only one project with many branches, i.e. attaining divinity, unquote. By divinity, writer doesn't mean immortal gods in our stories, but godlike powers to travel fast, communicate fast, and control our surroundings, something we already do today. So for our agricultural ancestors, we have everything that they considered godlike. From our ancestors' perspective, we are already living a life of gods. But as is human tendency, we take this progress for granted and still strive for more, and that is actual bodily immortality. And writer says even if in future we achieve that, given our tendency, we take that for granted too. Becoming godlike with superhuman abilities and bodily immortality will happen to us eventually. Given enough time and with gradual progress of technology, it will happen for sure, because that's humanity's agenda for the 21st century, divinity, to become Homo Deus.
Einstein had said, "I never think of future because it comes soon enough." This divinity this writer talks about, today we might think it's in the distant future, but we Homo sapiens are not good in understanding how time flows and how exponential growth happens. Technology is advancing as fast as nobody can today imagine what world would be living in the next 10 years. And humanity is already riding a fast car that nobody knows where the brakes are. Quote, while some experts are familiar with developments in one field such as artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, big data, or genetics, no one is an expert on everything. No one is therefore capable of connecting all the dots and seeing the full picture. Different fields influence one another in such intricate ways that even the best minds cannot fathom how breakthroughs in artificial intelligence might impact nanotechnology or vice versa. Nobody can absorb all the latest scientific discoveries, nobody can predict how the global economy will look in 10 years, and nobody has a clue where we are heading in such a rush. Since no one understands the system anymore, no one can stop it. Unquote. I believe this is the most important statement in this book.
Okay, after postulating thus far about humanity's future, being a historian, writer puts this disclaimer to his postulations. Quote, history is often shaped by exaggerated hopes. 20th century Russian history was largely shaped by the communist attempt to overcome inequality, but it didn't succeed. My prediction is focused on what humankind will try to achieve in the 21st century, not what it will succeed in achieving. Our future economy, society, and politics will be shaped by the attempt to overcome death. It does not follow that in 2100 humans will be immortal. Unquote.
Yeah, writer gives example of Karl Marx, how he reached brilliant economic insights, and based on those insights, predicted violent conflict between proletariat and capitalists, but that never happened because capitalists also read Das Kapital and adopted his insights and analysis to change their behavior. A writer calls this as paradox of knowledge. So, quote, this is the paradox of historical knowledge. Knowledge that does not change behavior is useless, but knowledge that changes behavior quickly loses its relevance. The more data we have and better we understand history, the faster history alters its course, and the faster our knowledge becomes outdated. Unquote. Writer goes on to say, quote, our newfound knowledge leads to faster economic, social, and political changes. In an attempt to understand what is happening, we accelerate the accumulation of knowledge, which leads only to faster and greater upheavals. Consequently, we are less and less able to make sense of the present or forecast the future. Unquote.
To me, it seems like this writer writes a book predicting humanity's future, even calls it A Brief History of Tomorrow, and yet he puts this disclaimer saying it is difficult to forecast the future, especially in today's world where mere 5 years can change a lot in technology, economy, and politics. So, to read between the lines, writer is trying to say, whatever I have written in this book, read it with a skeptical mind.
All these chapters until now are just premise of the book. Hereafter is the actual book, and the writer tells us what the book is all about. Quote, for 300 years, the world has been dominated by humanism, which sanctifies the life, happiness, and power of Homo sapiens. The attempt to gain immortality, bliss, and divinity merely takes the long-standing humanist ideals to their logical conclusion. It places openly on the table what we have for a long time kept hidden under our napkin. Yet I would like to place, this is writer saying, yet I would like to place something else on the table, a gun. A gun that appears in Act 1, to fire in Act 3. The following chapters discuss how humanism, the worship of humankind, has conquered the world, yet the rise of humanism also contains the seeds of its downfall, while the attempt to upgrade human into gods takes humanism to its logical conclusion. It simultaneously exposes humanism's inherent flaws. If you start with a flawless ideal, you often appreciate its defects only when the ideal is close to realization. Unquote.
Very apt. One more quotation. Quote, the real agenda in the 21st century is going to be far more complicated than what this long opening chapter has suggested. At present, it might seem that immortality, place, and divinity occupy the top slots on our agenda, but once we come nearer to achieving these goals, the resulting upheaval are likely to deflect us towards entirely different destinations. The future described in this chapter is merely the future of the past, i.e., future based on the ideas and hopes that dominate the world for the last 300 years. The real future, i.e., a future born of the new ideas and hopes of the 21st century, might be completely different. To understand all this, we need to go back and investigate who Homo sapiens really is, how humanism became the dominant world religion, and why attempting to fulfill the humanist dream is likely to cause its disintegration. This is the basic plan of the book, unquote. So what we read so far was the setting of the upcoming chapters, which is the gamut of this book, The Future of Humanity.
Let's first understand what is an Anthropocene. Quote, scientists divide the history of our planet into epochs such as the Pleistocene, the Pliocene, and the Miocene. Officially, we live in the Holocene epoch. Yet it may be better to call the last 70,000 years the Anthropocene epoch, the epoch of humanity. For during these millennia, Homo sapiens became the single most important agent of change in the global ecology. This is an unprecedented phenomenon. Since the appearance of life about 4 billion years ago, never has a single species changed the global ecology all by itself. Homo sapiens has rewritten the rules of the game. The single ape species has managed within 70,000 years to change the global ecosystem in radical and unprecedented ways. Our impact is already on a par with that of ice ages and tectonic movements. Within a century, our impact may surpass that of the asteroid that killed off the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Unquote. That's why writer says we live in an Anthropocene epoch because of our large-scale impact on life on this planet. Evolution, through natural selection, made life from organic compounds, modified it, mutated it, but life was still organic. Today, Homo sapiens are replacing its natural selection with intelligent design and turning life forms organic into inorganic. It's also not the case that Homo sapiens are affecting other life only for a few centuries. Our ancestors a few thousand years ago are also responsible for extinction of large species, for example, mammoths. Writer says anthropologists believe that archaic hunter-gatherers were probably animists, meaning they believed all life form was one. They talked to animals and trees and stones, and everything was part of conversation and negotiation. Personally, to me, that sounds like a very empathetic way of living, and I would love to see and live in such a world. In fact, even today, a tribe in South India called Nayaka still lives by this principle. They are animists. It's only when Homo sapiens turned to agriculture, that they stopped communicating with animals and started to believe themselves as distinct from other animals. Writer gives example of the Bible. Eve was seduced by a serpent to eat forbidden fruit. Eve, in most Semitic languages, means snake or even female snake. The Bible tells us talking to animals is a bad idea. That's where I believe humanity's foolishness begins, and humanity turned self-centric, telling self-important stories to each other. Now, here I'd like to remind our viewers, as I said earlier in our very first talk, when we managed to reach to that level of empathy and make other life forms part of our conversation, we'll be renaming our channel from We the Homo sapiens to We the Earthlings. So let's see how long it takes. This is the painful part of this book. Just like this writer's earlier book, Sapiens, in this part, he describes human cruelty towards domesticated animals, and as in last part, I will skip talking about this part too. Just one note, writer mentions how humans, out of their own greed, imprison domesticated animals and don't allow them enough space or time to flourish the way nature intended them. thus stifling their inner instincts and their own natural growth. What writer calls as their ancestral needs, the needs that nature or natural selection inculcated in those animals.
For me too, it was difficult to read this section. Sometimes I feel ashamed to belong to the same species as these humans who are so cruel to animals.
A question here is why we both skipped talking about the earlier part. Because it describes animal cruelty towards animal, pigs and cows. Yeah, but why would that bother us? They are not humans. Why should cruelty to them make us feel pain? Of course, we have sense of empathy, that's why, but still, we are guilty of humanizing. Or are we guilty of humanizing animals? Writer has an answer to that question. We don't humanize pigs and cows, we mammalize them. Quote, emotions are not a uniquely human quality. They are common to all mammals, as well as to all birds and probably to some reptiles and even fish. All mammals evolved emotional abilities and needs, and from the fact that pigs are mammals, we can safely deduce that they have emotions. In recent decades, life scientists have demonstrated that emotions are not some mysterious spiritual phenomenon that is useful just for writing poetry and composing symphonies. Rather, emotions are biochemical algorithms that are vital for the survival and reproduction of all animals. Unquote.
Biochemical algorithms. Now, what does it mean? Quotation. Quote, an algorithm is a methodical set of steps that can be used to make calculations, resolve problems, and reach decisions. An algorithm isn't a particular calculation, but the method followed when making the calculation. The algorithms controlling vending machine work through mechanical gears and electric circuits. The algorithms controlling humans work through sensations, emotions, and thoughts. And exactly the same kind of algorithm controls pigs, baboons, otters, and chickens. Unquote. Here's more explanation of what biochemical algorithm exactly is. Quote, in order to transmit genes to the next generation, it is not enough to solve survival problems. Animals also need to solve reproduction problems too, and this depends on calculating probabilities. Natural selection evolved passion and disgust as quick algorithms for evaluating reproduction odds. Beauty means good chances of having successful offspring. When a woman sees a man and thinks, wow, he is gorgeous, and when a peahen sees a peacock and thinks, Jesus, what a tail, they are doing something similar to the automatic vending machine. As light reflected from the male's body hits their retinas, extremely powerful algorithms honed by millions of years of evolution kick in. Within a few seconds of algorithms convert tiny cues in the male's external appearance into reproduction probabilities and reach the conclusion. In all likelihood, this is a very healthy and fertile male with excellent genes. If I mate with him, my offspring are also likely to enjoy good health and excellent genes. Of course, this conclusion is not spelled out in words or numbers, but in the fiery edge of sexual attraction. Peahens and most women don't make such calculations with pen and paper, they just feel them. Unquote. I believe this is a very beautiful explanation of what a biochemical algorithm is. And that brings me to him. The last time I asked you if you feel anything when you see a particularly pulchritudinous female, you said you're usually too busy with your mind to look around. And now we know you were lying. You're such a hypocrite. You can't be above this biochemical algorithm. Of course you feel sexual attraction for females. Your proclamation that the words reason and rationality appear to you first thing in the morning, that was just you trying to deceive yourself. Don't try to deny your mammalian algorithm. Accept it, my friend. You can't hide this algorithm.
Why do you always make it about me and female Homo sapiens?
Because I care about you and I want you to be with some female Homo sapien before I leave this planet.
You are leaving?
See, you care about me too.
I just follow your hero, Buddha. Like him, I aspire for something beyond female Homo sapiens.
Why do you always make it about my hero and female Homo sapiens?
Touché. I agree, I am bound by this biochemical algorithm and I feel attraction, but I also aspire for more reason in my life and want to go beyond this algorithm.
More reason for what?
So I can lead more rational life.
More rational life for what?
So I can understand myself better. Know thyself.
You aspire for higher human virtue of self-inquiry through reason, and yet last time you said you aspire for no virtues. This is again hypocrisy, and yet when I called you a hypocrite, you got angry.
I am not a hypocrite. I merely contradicted myself. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitude.
Yeah. Walt Whitman. Good escape. I'll grant you that.
This portion of book describes human domination over nature and other life forms. Quote, the rise of modern science and industry brought about the next revolution in human-animal relations. During the agricultural revolution, humankind silenced animals and plants and turned the animist grand opera into a dialogue between man and gods. During the scientific revolution, humankind silenced the gods too. The world was now a one-man show. Humankind stood alone on an empty stage, talking to itself, negotiating with no one, and acquiring enormous powers without any obligations. Having deciphered the mute laws of physics, chemistry, and biology, humankind now does with them as it pleases. Unquote. Just like hunter-gatherers and later on farmers had their myths and gods, today's humanity has different myths and gods. The myth of apple falling on Newton's head and him discovering laws of gravitation. Teachers around the world teach this myth to encourage curiosity in children, implying if we gain enough knowledge, we can create paradise on earth. Thus, writer argues, as agricultural revolution gave rise to theist religions, scientific revolution gave rise to humanist religion, in which humans replace gods. Quote, the founding idea of humanist religions, such as liberalism, communism, and Nazism is that Homo sapiens has some unique and sacred essence that is the source of all meaning and authority in the universe. Everything that happens in the cosmos is judged to be good or bad according to its impact on Homo sapiens. Unquote. Thus, we become far too self-centric and conveniently forget the fact that other animals are sentient beings and have valid right to life. We not just disregard other animals, their right to life, we treat them as mere material objects to satisfy our greed.
Writer goes on to argue that scientific revolution has given us these extraordinary powers over other animals that we subjugate them to any kind of cruelty for our needs. But the same scientific revolution is now helping us to create artificial intelligence, and perhaps one day this same artificial intelligence might grow so advanced and surpass human intelligence that in front of this superhuman intelligence we might look like feeble animals, and this AI might subjugate us to the same cruelty that we mete out towards animals. Writer says, while treating animals differently, we always believe that we humans are different than other animals, that we are exceptional, that we contain some kind of a spark, a human spark.
This chapter starts with a question. Quote, when we privilege human children over piglets, we want to believe that this reflects something deeper than the ecological balance of power. We want to believe that human lives really are superior in some fundamental way. We sapiens love telling ourselves that we enjoy some magical quality that not only accounts for our immense power but also gives moral justification for our privileged status. What is this unique human spark? Unquote. Then various answers follow, claiming that humans have eternal soul and animals are just ephemeral bodies without any soul. Again, quote, this is no kindergarten fairy tale, but an extremely powerful myth that continues to shape the lives of billions of humans and animals in the early 21st century. The belief that humans have eternal souls whereas animals are just evanescent bodies is the central pillar of our legal, political, and economic system. It explains why, for example, it is perfectly okay for humans to kill animals for food or even just for the fun of it. Unquote.
Unfortunately for us, even with the latest scientific discoveries, we have not yet found the evidence for soul in human bodies. Just as we believe animals lack souls, scientists could not find any trace of any kind of souls in human bodies too. And this is something that makes people angry, particularly angry towards theory of evolution that we talked about in our first book. Why the anger towards the theory of evolution? It's obvious, because it says we originated from animals and no God created us with special human spark, hence discrediting the eternal soul myth. Also, after soul myth, another answer to why humans are special is because humans have consciousness. And what does that exactly mean? A quote. To be frank, science knows surprisingly little about mind and consciousness. Current orthodoxy holds that consciousness is created by electrochemical reactions in the brain and that mental experiences fulfill some essential data processing function. However, nobody has any idea how a congeries of biochemical reactions and electrical currents in the brain create the subjective experience of pain, anger, or love. Perhaps we will have a solid explanation in 10 or 50 years, but as of 2016, when this book was written, we have no such explanation, unquote. Now, we'll be talking about this topic, human consciousness, in detail with some other book. This is the crux of human existence, and I believe it is important for us to understand this topic in much detail as we can.
The writer goes on to describe various ideas as to what consciousness might be, what mind might be, how mind and brain are related, or perhaps if not related, then why do we need mind if everything happens in the brain? And in all this, where is human consciousness exactly? And as he said, this is an immensely interesting topic, and we'll be making another video with another much detailed book on this topic. But for now, I'll just quote what this writer has the answer to the question, what is consciousness? Quote, some scientists concede that consciousness is real and may actually have great moral and political value, but that it fulfills no biological function whatsoever. Consciousness is the biologically useless byproduct of certain brain processes. Jet engines roar loudly, but the noise doesn't propel the aeroplane forward. Humans don't need carbon dioxide, but each and every breath fills the air with more of the stuff. Similarly, consciousness may be a kind of mental pollution produced by the firing of the complex neural networks. It doesn't do anything. It just is there. If it is true, it implies that all the pain and pleasure experienced by the billions of creatures for millions of years is just mental pollution. This is certainly a thought worth thinking, even if it isn't true. But it is quite amazing to realize that as of 2016, this is the best theory of consciousness that contemporary science has to offer us, unquote.
Earlier, this writer claimed organisms are nothing but biochemical algorithms. But here too, he says this analogy might mislead us. Just like earlier in the 19th century, scientists described brain and mind as if they were steam engines. And why steam engine? Because that was the leading technology of the day. Today, in the 21st century, we think mind as data processing computer, but this analogy, writer says, might just be turned out to be as naive. We even think today that a whole reality might be a mere simulation and everything is a part of game in virtual reality played by some other superior being. In my view, this analogy is again as fallacious as earlier analogies. Just because today we have virtual reality, we analogize actual reality with it. Tomorrow, there might be some advanced technology and we might have another analogy to describe reality. Anyway, a writer dwells on this topic for a while and goes on to describe how animals like rats, chimpanzees, and horses have abilities that might make us think about animal consciousness. So, quote, we humans are not that different from rats, dogs, dolphins, or chimpanzees. Like them, we do have no soul. Like us, they too have consciousness and a complex world of sensations and emotions. Of course, every animal has its unique traits and talents. Humans too have their special gifts. We shouldn't humanize animals needlessly, imagining that they are just inferior versions of ourselves. This is not only bad science, but it also prevents us from understanding and valuing other animals on their own terms, unquote.
To elaborate the last point about animal consciousness, the writer gives examples of lab rats, a chimpanzee in a zoo, and a very clever horse named Hans. Two lab rats drowned in water. One is saved just before he loses hope after 14 minutes of struggle. This saved rat, when drowned again, struggles for 20 minutes before losing hope, proving that this rat had conscious understanding of the past help, and his brain secreted some biological or biochemical that gave that rat hope for extra 6 minutes, a biochemical that can be used in humans as antidepressants. So can we say rats understood hope? That rat understood hope.
Another story is about a male chimpanzee in a zoo in Sweden. Chimpanzee collects stones in advance to throw them at visitors. When visitors knew this habit of this chimpanzee, they kept distance. Then the chimp escalated by hiding stones under the bales of straw and anywhere that is invisible to visitors. Chimp didn't show anger in advance and only pelted visitors when they were within range. So this shows this chimp learned how to have fun at the expense of human gullibility. This smart chimp planned in advance to have fun because he understood human behavior.
In early 1900s, a horse named Hans became a German celebrity. This horse showed remarkable understanding of German language, and even more remarkable, he understood basic maths. When asked, Hans, what is 4 times 3? Hans tapped his hoof 12 times. The writer explains that this horse learned not the math, but even more complex phenomenon. Hans, the clever horse, learned how to understand human body language. Horses usually communicate with each other through body language, but Hans was advanced in his understanding, and he learned how to read humans. As he tapped, he saw tension built up amongst his observers, and when he tapped the right amount, he sensed release of tension in humans. This is far more remarkable than basic maths. So can we say this horse possesses advanced level of consciousness compared to other species?
Giving these examples, writer conveys that of course animals possess consciousness, but moreover they possess even more remarkable abilities that we humans lack or probably are not aware of.
As we discussed last time in this writer's book, Sapiens, imagined orders such as money, nation, God are not merely imagined subjective realities for us humans, but we consider them as objective realities. So, quote, most people presume that reality is either objective or subjective and that there is no third option. Hence, once they satisfy themselves that something isn't just their own subjective feeling, they jump to the conclusion it must be objective. If lots of people believe in God, if money makes the world go round, and if nationalism starts wars and builds empires, then these things aren't just a subjective belief of mine. God, money, and nations must therefore be objective realities. However, there is a third level of reality, the intersubjective level. Intersubjective entities depend on communication among many humans rather than on the beliefs and feelings of individual humans. Many of the most important agents in history are intersubjective. Unquote.
Yeah, writer explains how something becomes meaningful for us humans. Quote, meaning is created when many people weave together a common network of stories. Why does a particular action such as getting married in church, fasting on Ramadan, or voting on election day seems meaningful to me? Because my parents also think it is meaningful. So, as do my brothers, my neighbors, people in nearby cities, and even the residents of far-off countries. And why do all these people think it is meaningful? Because their friends and neighbors also share the same view. People constantly reinforce each other's beliefs in a self-perpetuating loop. Each round of mutual confirmation tightens the wave of meaning further, until we have little choice but to believe what everyone else believes. Unquote. So then further on, belief that we were once meaningful gradually become meaningless as we acquire new imagined realities. Quote, over decades and centuries, the web of meaning unraveled and a new web is spun in its place. To study history means to watch the spinning and unraveling of these webs, and to realize that what seems to people in one age the most important thing in life becomes utterly meaningless to their descendants. Unquote. A writer gives examples such as idea of medieval Christian crusaders today is outdated, and instead fighting for human rights is new intersubjective reality for us that gives us a sense of meaning.
Dreamtime. Quote, Sapiens rule the world because only they can view an intersubjective wave of meaning, a wave of laws, forces, entities, and places that exist purely in their common imagination. This wave allows humans alone to organize crusades, socialist revolutions, and human rights movements. No other animal can stand up to us, not because they lack a soul or a mind, but because they lack the necessary imagination. Lions can run, jump, claw, and bite, yet they cannot open a bank account or file a lawsuit. And in the 21st century, a banker who knows how to file a lawsuit is far more powerful than the most ferocious lion in the savannah. Unquote.
Further quotations. Quote, as well as separating humans from other animals, this ability to create intersubjective entities also separates the humanities from the life sciences. Historians seek to understand the development of intersubjective entities like gods and nations, whereas biologists hardly recognize the existence of such things. Some believe that if we could only crack the genetic code and map every neuron in the brain, we will know all of the human's secrets. After all, if humans have no soul, and if thoughts, emotions, and sensations are just biochemical algorithms, why can't biology account for all the vagaries of human species? Quote, just last one more quote, and a very profound one. Quote, as human fictions are translated into genetic and electronic codes, the intersubjective reality will swallow up the objective reality, and biology will merge with history. In the 21st century, fiction might thereby become the most potent force on Earth, surpassing even wayward asteroids and natural selection. Hence, if we want to understand our future, cracking genomes and crunching numbers is hardly enough. We must also decipher the fictions that give meaning to the world. Unquote.
So, in the next concluding part, we'll see how Homo sapiens give meaning to the world and how they lose control. So for now, that's all. Bye.